Okay, welcome back to the second video, which will explore the second stage, the witness. And this is the first big shift in reshaping the mind and how it understands itself. And it's incredible that it becomes your new norm and seemingly doesn't go away. Whereas before, maybe you only had temporary altered state changes, but this is a new locked-in configuration of mind. Remember, I'm not talking about state changes. I'm talking about what becomes your new default sense of / relationship to the mind and world and self. The witness stage comes about after sufficient heavy-duty observation of your mind. You realize that you are not the thinker of your thoughts, or really any mental content, emotions as well, but that there is something that is aware of those goings on, and that must be where you really reside. And so the mind opens up a rift and configures itself with this distinction between awareness and everything there is to be aware of. I would believe that this stage comes about once the practitioner has built up some threshold of metacognition. There is a sense that you have discovered something new, but at the same time that something was already there, and that this is your true self. It's understood that this awareness precedes biographical memories, personal history, and any sense of the local individual person who you previously identified with your whole life until this point. And so this awareness is not personal. It is not my awareness compared to your awareness. It is primordial in a way. It seems obvious that everyone has this pure shining light of awareness. They just don't know it, just as you used to not know it. So now you can detach from thoughts. And so if a thought does come up, it's easy to understand it's just a thought and not real. It doesn't have to be taken seriously or believed in. This can provide a kind of antidote to existential crises. The space between thoughts is now clearer and feels nice and interesting. The shift from standard perception to the witness is immense because it's the first radical perspective shift one goes through. But in some sense, it's still more of the same dualistic perception. Just the dividing line has been moved to a new, pristine, peaceful place that has opened up. Now when you close your eyes, you don't feel like you're trapped in some small dark room, but that there is a lot of space, and immediately you get a sense of equanimity. There is no longer a sense of inside and outside the mind, just things to be aware of and awareness itself. You may see people close their eyes a lot at this stage as they're blocking out the world of form and tuning into that more special spiritual place. As we will see throughout these stages, there are some aspects of mind that completely cease to be rendered any longer, and there will be some aspects which continue to pop up, but are now understood as empty. Okay, so now you have permanent access to a source of equanimity on hand anytime you incline the mind towards it. It's not a massively deep form of equanimity. As Kenneth Folk describes it, it's like a backdrop of meta-okayness. But it's still amazing to have, and this really is the first stabilized insight into emptiness. Instead of feeling like you have to actively seek out information, it is as if you are merely receiving information. You are the unperturbable light of being, and the world works through you, not the other way around. There is a big loss in the sense of agency. The feeling of having free will considerably drops off. This awareness has an impersonal, indifferent quality to it. It doesn't interfere, it simply observes. Maybe before this you couldn't understand how there couldn't be free will, or maybe you could intellectually understand arguments against free will. But despite that, you still really felt like you had free will. However, now, the position that free will is an illusion makes a lot more sense to you viscerally. In fact, I think many people find it impossible to grasp how there couldn't be free will because they just feel like such an individual ego and the arbiter of their decisions. But once you have this new reference point of a weakened sense of agency, yet seeing how the organism still functions and does things, then the idea of free will seems a lot less tenable now. Life really gets easier at this stage. Kind of like in the way that people say when they drink it takes the edge off. Achieving the witness stage just permanently takes the edge off of life in a big way, except you're not drunk. The hard-hitting elements of life, although they still hit you, their corners have been smoothed off and are so less soul-penetratingly spiky. You realize that you don't have to control as much as you thought you did, and so you stress less, fret less, and in turn experience less contractions. Also now, a lot more spiritual teachings seem very relatable. You realize inner peace is a real thing. Another way to describe this setup of mind is it's as if you've taken about a half step back from the world of form or phenomenal content. And so you feel like you now have this permanent extra gap between yourself and life. It has a dissociative quality to it, and you can feel a bit detached from things, which is very peaceful, but is defocusing the world and kind of turning a blind eye to your issues. At this stage, you hear people make analogies to a film screen versus the play of lights projected on that screen, and awareness and self versus content to be aware of. You hear this kind of teaching that anything you can be aware of isn't you, because who is the one who is aware? As if that's a good argument. You also hear talk of pure consciousness. There is only one light of consciousness, and that is your true essence. The uncorruptible, primordial perfection. Gurus may say, rest as pure presence. Seek refuge in the eternal now. The witness seems to be a stationary thing, which is outside of time in some way. You hear talk of a distinction between the realm of form and the formless. Here I'll make a quick point that it's easy to see how the language at one stage can sound similar to another stage, though really they are getting at something different. You may even hear similar appraisals of infinite space and boundarylessness or even centerlessness, because that screen of awareness doesn't have definitive edges to it. As although the mind is projecting that there must be this uncontainable consciousness space, it is, however, not modeled in very much detail. A person's perceptual clarity is still pretty basic at this point, and so they don't have a clear view of what this awareness is. They have a sense that there is something really peaceful behind everything, but that this thing or themselves is always just out of sight. They sense this uncapturable awareness, but don't really know how they know it. They couldn't describe it because to them, anything they would use to reference it would just be another thing to be aware of. And awareness is not that thing, but is that which is before it. At this point, the practitioner is fully irreversibly on the path and on the downward slope towards enlightenment, whereas before practice was like riding a bike uphill. Now they've kind of, turned a corner, reached a peak, and it's like just gets easier for them, although there will continue to be trials and tribulations for sure. Something that can be typical at this stage is that people come across as very detached, dissociated, and more robotic, less emotional, as there is a disengagement with the imperfect world of form. There may be a thought that if you just act and speak from pure consciousness, you'll live a much nobler life and be speaking from a source of wisdom. Some find this mode of perception, lock it in, and just decide this is the peaceful place they want to be. I'm going to put all my mental attention into this in a big way and try to live the rest of my life from there. This will be a common trap at each stage. And you hear stories of people having established the witness and then spending decades in this stage, not furthering or inquiring into, no longer deconstructing more aspects of their mind or challenging this sense of pure consciousness. However, if someone is really honest with themselves, they know that they still very much have emotional flare-ups, and that hanging out in the witness all the time is a suppression method more than actually dealing with their issues. Though the witness can seem very healing, it is a kind of pleasant dissociative way of being. And from now on, and for the rest of one's life, and into the other stages, when emotions arise, it never fully captures the mind. One never feels like their whole perception is totally colored by their emotions. But the witness is great though, and was one of my favorite modes of perception. It was a great tool to acquire, and it's exciting when someone gets this because you know their life is going to be easier now in a big way. It's not that there won't be tough times, still befalling them, but they have an equanimity buffer now which will afford them more mental resilience. So that's it for the second stage, the witness, and I hope this was informative, and I'll see you next time for the next stage. Big mind.